everybody. Welcome to the Smell Podcast. My name's Katie Price, and I'm your host. I wanted to start off today with a listener correction. On episode 2, the news roundup, in the article, "This is a part of aging that really stinks," I mistakenly defined parosmia as someone who experiences phantom smells. Listener Chrissy informed me of the correct definition via Twitter, and this is what she said. Parosmia is the distortion of an existing smell. This happens because the olfactory nerve is transmitting an incomplete message to the brain, which means olfactory nerve damage. Phantosmia is the perception of a smell which does not exist. Why? I don't think this has been proven, but the theory is that the brain tries to replace missing messages with some kind of background noise. It might be compared to tinnitus, which is the experience of sound that is literally in the person's head. Both are sometimes described in the same way. Burning, acrid, foul, disgusting, maybe cigarette smell, but each have a different origin, and by each she means parosmia versus phantosmia. It is confusing because they are described similarly, but their causes are very different. Thank you so much for sending in this correction. If you guys don't know Chrissy and you'd like to follow her on Twitter, you can find her at chriskelly151, and that's CHRISKELLY151. Chrissy does a lot of great work with smell training, so if you haven't already, check out the smell training group on Facebook. I always welcome any corrections or suggestions that you listeners have, so if you have any, or you notice something that you'd like to say, please send them to me at thesmellpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send them via Twitter at thesmellpodcast. Okay, so for today's minisode, I'm going to read some more listener stories to you to share their experiences living with a smell and a taste disorder. Again, the goal of sharing these stories with all of you is so that you know you're not alone. There are other people going through similar situations as you, and my hope is that that gives you some comfort. All right, let's get started with our stories. Our first story comes from listener Craig, and he writes, "I am a congenital anosmic, which means I was born without a sense of smell. I have never smelled anything in my life, and I do not understand the concept. Most people who know me well know this, although at times they will forget. My wife thinks it's funny because she can be baking something in the kitchen and I won't know. My experience of anosmia, although seemingly the same as that of someone with acquired anosmia, is quite different from theirs. I feel badly for them because they have a deep sense of loss and disorientation. I can't imagine what it's like. My anosmia does not depress me, it's just a part of who I am, along with having dark brown eyes, graying hair, and a rather dark sense of humor. My children grew up with my anosmia. They were accustomed to having me ask them if they'd smell something in the refrigerator and telling me if it had gone bad. When the kids were small, I often got the really nasty poopy diapers. I have always known that I can't smell anything, but as a child didn't fully understand it. If friends or my family would comment on how something smelled, I would just agree with them. When we were riding down to the beach, my mother would say that we were getting closer because they could smell the sea air. I had no idea what she was talking about. My father used to say that he could smell a change in the air when it was going to rain. I had no idea. I never said anything to anyone because I thought that I'd be in trouble or someone would laugh at me. In high school, I took my girlfriend to the senior prom. I was at her house the next day, and her mother mentioned the fancy perfume that she had let her daughter use. I innocently said, "What perfume?" And she was really angry that I hadn't noticed it. It was then that I realized that I had absolutely no sense of smell. It wasn't until I was an adult that I would tell people about my lack of smell. It was only in the situation, like when someone commented on how something smelled. Once I felt comfortable telling others about it, I was surprised at their responses. One typical response would be, "I'll bet you can smell blank." They would also ask if I could taste anything. I would say yes, and the response would be, "But most of your taste is in the smell, so you shouldn't be able to taste anything." In other words, I was lying, according to them. Now I'm 61 and I'm perfectly comfortable with my anosmia. I have never pursued any tests or treatment because I know what the result would be. It's congenital and can't be corrected. I have seen how bad smells can be distracting and upsetting to people, such as the skunk smell when it's been hit by a car or food gone bad. I know that I will never smell a flower or a good meal or a glass of wine, but I accept it because I can do nothing to change it. It's just who I am. People will often say, "What a shame," when I tell them, and I'll respond, "Why?" I don't feel badly about not being able to smell because I never have. Don't feel sorry for me, I'll say. That's my story. This story came from listener Craig in Connecticut. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I have acquired anosmia, so it's interesting for me to hear about someone who has never had a sense of smell. What about all of you listeners? Do you have acquired or congenital anosmia? Our next listener story comes from Amy. The really cool thing about her story is that you guys will get to listen to it in her own voice. Okay, here's her story.
Hi, my name is Amy. About a year and a half ago, I had what I thought were a lot of sinus headaches and pressure, and I was living on Sudafed and other drugs, and we were up at my brother's cabin, and we were in the basement doing some remodeling when my brother went upstairs and started yelling, and we ran up to see what was going on, and he was opening windows and doors screaming, "Gas, gas." I had no idea what he was talking about because I couldn't smell anything, and he couldn't believe that I couldn't smell, and I guess one of his daughters had bumped one of the gas burners on the stove, and the house smelled like gas. I just assumed it was because I had a stuffed up head that's why I couldn't smell it. I went to my regular doctor, and he said, "Oh, you probably just need an antibiotic to get rid of the sinus infection." But that did not work. And then he sent me to an ENT, and the ENT said, "Well, we can do a CAT scan and see, or a CT rather." And after the CT scan was done, he said, "Ma'am, there's nothing wrong with your sinuses." And I said, "Yes, there is. I can't stand the pain and pressure." And he basically yelled at me and said, "There's nothing wrong with you, but I suppose we could talk to a neurologist," which I thought he was crazy, but whatever. So I went to the neurologist, and he said, "What do you think's wrong with you?" And I said, "I have sinus headaches, and I can't really smell anymore." And then he kind of looked at me funny, and he said, "Maybe we should do an MRI." After the MRI was done, he called me in a panic because I had a very large brain tumor right behind the bridge of my nose. Scared the hell out of me, and the surgeon said, "Well, we'll do surgery and take it out." So they did, and it was called a meningioma. They are benign. I do not have cancer. I made a full physical recovery, except that stupid tumor basically ate my entire olfactory nerve, so I no longer can smell and never will be able to smell again. They had told me that it's possible I could get a glimmer of smell at 6 months. I went in for a 6-month MRI. There was nothing, and they said, "Well, sometimes at the 1-year mark you might be able to smell something." 1 year has now passed, and I think I've been in denial for a year, and it's really hit me now hard that I will never be able to smell anything ever again. I can't smell my husband. I can't smell my grandbabies. I can't smell flowers. I want to smell perfume. I want to smell anything. Anything at all would be awesome. Food is extremely bland. I now have to put hot sauce and salt on everything. It's lonely. No one knows about the silent disability because I still have a nose. It still works. It functions. It just doesn't smell anything. Everything smells like air, as I call it. You know, you can chuckle, and there's good things like I can change diapers, I can, take out the garbage, that sort of thing. Ha ha. But it's like I'm living in a world where I look through the glass, but I can't really participate. Or it's like walking around with a giant bubble around you, where you are still in life, but you don't experience it. It is so very hard for people who can smell to realize how much you take that for granted. How sad and lonely it is to be the only one who can't smell. It's awful. I hate it. I cry. I get angry. Sometimes I ignore it. I lie to people because I'm sick of the questions. "Oh, really? You can't smell? Maybe you could smell a skunk. Maybe you just need to try harder." No, it's gone. It's never coming back. No one gets it. I've reached out on Facebook, and now Katie with this podcast, and I am so happy to find people who understand. My husband is a sweetie, but he doesn't get it. He doesn't realize how much I need to have him be my nose. I'm scared to death of eating something spoiled because I would have no idea. We moved into a new house, and I wanted a gas stove because we were avid cooks. or at least I used to be. And he said, no, honey, remember the cabin incident? You would probably not be, well, not probably, I would not be able to smell gas if I bumped one of the burners. And he was right. So what happens now? I don't know. I wish ENTs and other medical people would really understand how serious this is and how sad and lonely it is. I'm on antidepressants. I've had to increase the dosage per my therapist because the sadness is just unbelievably overwhelming. And people say, well, you survived brain surgery and you could have had a stroke and, almost like quit your whining. Yes, I am grateful I am still here. I'm grateful I have a job and insurance and everything else. My life is great. But this lack of smell and taste, because I did not, as all of us who have this, you didn't lose just one sense. You lost two. And it's awful. So yeah, that's my story. I'm 55 years old. I have a husband, a daughter, 2 grandbabies, a huge loving family. So I try to count my blessings. I really do. But this is awful. And I'm hoping that through Katie's work and other people, we can get the word out so that maybe if there's more people who understood and more resources for us to turn to, we wouldn't have to feel so sad and alone to have to live with anosmia. Thank you for listening. This is Amy. Bye-bye.
Thank you to Amy for sharing her story, and thank you all for listening. If you have any corrections, suggestions, or listener stories that you'd like to share, please let me know. You can tweet me at The Smell Podcast. And if you have a story you'd like to share for the next minisode, please send it to thesmellpodcast@gmail.com. Listener stories can be your anosmia story, or it could be something funny or sad that happened to you because of your anosmia. I personally always get diaper duty for my nieces and nephew because I can't smell. All right, until next time, everybody, have a great day. Voting isn't just going to the polls on election day anymore. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote, a tool created by Democracy Works, breaks down the options your state offers for casting a ballot, empowering you to decide when and where to vote. Democracy works best when we all vote, but misinformation and confusion about election procedures have resulted in low voter turnout. How to Vote, a tool created by Democracy Works, takes the guesswork out of the voting process. Some examples of actions voters can take using the How to Vote voter tool include signing up for election reminders, seeing what's on your ballot, and getting step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot. Decide when and where you'll vote this year at howto.vote.